Okay, solve the equation for x. We have 5x to the second power minus 15x equals 0. Now, when you're solving these, you're solving for finding what the letter equals. But since that letter is now to the power of 2, you have two possible answers, and they will be different. Now, unfortunately, what makes this a pain, you have x to the power of 2. And you also have this x that isn't to the power of 2. It's just to the power of 1. Okay? Don't put that up in the equation. Okay? You just put x squared and x. These two cannot be combined. We have to use a process known as factoring. Okay? So this is how we factor. You circle one side of the equals. And you make sure you have a 0 on one side. You do, so you're set. So you draw in the slots yourself, okay? So you got 5x second and negative 15x. So that is 2, and then you make a wall, so that's 2 terms. The 5x second, the 15x. There's no constant. 0 doesn't count for anything, okay? So it's 2 terms. So if I have to factor 2 terms at this point in the unit, you just make what's known as a GCF box. You just kick out the equals 0. That comes from here. Then you make a space and then a parentheses. And then under that space you write GCF. Now remember how you're going to find your GCF from yesterday. You're just looking over here. You're not looking at 0. You're just looking at where the wall ended. Check the final term for a variable or a letter. That final line has a letter, x. Check the first term for a negative. I look in the front and there's no negative, so do not put the negative. Then 5 and 15. So you find the GCF of the coefficients. That would be 5 and 15. So here's the fifth row. Here's 5, here's 15. So it would be 5 because they're both in the fifth row. Then you put that in a parentheses and you go up and do the opposite of multiply, which is divide. So 5x, whatever I put in here, is what I put under these lines. 5x, so I put 5x under that line and under that line. Now you're dividing. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. Now you divide your letters, x second by x. You put x, that's x second. Then you divide by the solo x, because it doesn't have a power, so it's to the 1 power. And then you cancel, and then you still have that x left over, so you put that alongside the 1. Then you take negative 15 divided by 5. If you get a negative, you put minus 3, okay? That negative 3 is going to be expressed as minus and then just 3. No negative. Just put, if this second division, if this second line divides to a negative, you put a minus. If it divides to a positive, you put a plus. That's simple. Then I divide the x by the x. Neither one of them have powers, so it's just a single x divided by a single x, which means they cancel. That's how letters work. Now, you put your 5x from here, you're just lining that up, and then your 1x minus 3. Equals 0, this and this. So this is F1, this is F2. F stands for factors. So 5x equals 0, 1x minus 3 equals 0. So you have times 5, so you're going to divide each side by 5. 0 divided by 5 is 0. Okay. Then over here, you got times 1 and minus 3. So you get rid of a minus 3 with a plus 3. And that 0 plus 3 is 3. Then you divide by 1. And 3 divided by 1 is 3. So 0 and 3. Okay, next problem. Negative 2x to the second power plus 20x equals 0. So again, x is to the second. The highest power is 2, so you have an x second, and you've also got this x right here that is to the first. So we will need to factor. So 0's there, you're set. Okay? So now So if you're set, you make a wall on this side and put the slots in the terms. So you have x to the second with the negative 2, x with the 20. There's no constant, okay? So again, that's two terms I need to factor. Two terms at this point in our class, you just make the GCF box. Then, follow your rules. Check the final term for a variable. Remember, not looking at the 0. You're only looking on this side of the equals. That last slot has a variable. It has x. Check the first term for a negative. Oh, the first term does have a negative. So I put a negative in front of there. And then you find the GCF of the coefficients, which would be 2 and 20. So 2 would be, we look in the 2 row first and find 20. 20's there, so it would be 2 that I would use. Then you put a parentheses around that, then you go up and divide by negative 2x. So a negative 2 divided by negative 2 is a positive 1. Then I have to divide the letters. How I do that? I put x second as xx, and x is just solo x. Cancel, and you put that x alongside your 1. Then I take positive 20 divided by negative 2. And that's negative 10. So if you got a negative, you write minus the number 10. And then divide the x by the x. Now, neither one of those x's have powers, so you could just cross them out there, or you could come over here. They cross out, so don't put an x after your 10. I shouldn't see that. Okay? So now, you have negative 2x, and then 1x minus 10 equals 0. So F1, F2. So the negative 2x could equal 0, or the 1x minus 10 could equal 0. So you got times, so you're going to divide both these by negative 2. 0 divided by anything, it doesn't matter if it's a positive or a negative, is 0. Now in the other part, the other factor, we got times 1 and minus 10. So you get rid of your minus 10 with a plus 10, and 0 plus 10 is 10. Then you divide each side by 1, and 10 divided by 1 is 10. So 0 and 10 are the two answers. Okay, next page. Negative 6x to the second power equals 21x. So again, x is to the second power, meaning that variable in the equation has two possible answers to it. Okay, we have x to the second. We've also got this x over here, and that's to the first. Don't put the 1 up in the equation. It's going to be confusing. Just put it down here so you know these are two different powers of x. They cannot be combined. We have to factor one side of the equation into an F1, F2. But the problem is we don't have our 0. So I put my own 0 here. That means I got to take the 21x out by adding or subtracting. Well, since it's positive, we're going to minus 21x. Now, remember, it's 21x, so I'm going to have to put a minus 21x on this side, but it can't go under the x to the second. X second and x are not the same term, okay? So you cannot put it with this. If you don't have an x without a power on this side, because that was x to the first power, I put minus 21x and hang it out. Just like that. It doesn't go with anything over there, so I hang it out. I put it in the hangout right above the equals. Okay? You cannot put an x to the second with an x. That's the main rule. So now you put the equals 0 and you draw your slots. First two problems, the slots were already ready to go. Now you had to get the 0, so you move that out of there by minusing it, but it can't go with the x to the second term. It has to just sit with itself. Okay, so I have a slot for x to the second. And then I have a slot for the x because I have this minus 21. I do not have a constant, okay? 0 doesn't count for anything. So the only two numbers I have over here are the negative 6 and the negative 21. That's x second, that's x. There are no constants, okay? So you got to look for that. So don't put an extra line when you don't have that term. So x second is negative 6, And x, a minus 21, would be slotted in as a negative 21. Okay, now you're set. Okay, so you make your wall, and you see the two terms. So I make my GCF box equals 0 outside of it. The equals 0 just drops down. Then a line with a parenthesis. This line stands for GCF, greatest common factor. So you check your final term for a letter, and there's a letter there, so I put X. You check your first term for a negative. It's there, so we need to put a negative. Now 6 and 21, so you go up into row 6, there's no 21. Then I go find 6, and here's 21, so it would be 3. Okay. So in that parentheses, I have put negative 3x, so that is exactly what I'm dividing both of these by. So negative 6 divided by negative 3 is positive 2. And then divide the x second by the x, same as before. Put that x alongside your 2. Now I take negative 21 divided by negative 3, and that's positive this time, so instead of writing minus, we put plus 7. Okay, and then the x divided by the x, neither one of them have powers, so those just cancel. You can cancel them right there if you want. Okay, so we have negative 3x, and then we have 2x plus 7. So this is F1, this is F2. So negative 3x could equal 0, and then 2x plus 7 could equal 0. So I times, so you just divide here by negative 3, and 0 divided by negative 3 is 0. Now over here you got times 2 and plus 7, so you minus 7. 0 minus 7 will take us to negative 7. And then you divide each side by 2. Okay, now you are going to get a decimal. I'm okay with a decimal. You can do this and put negative 3.5. If you don't like decimals, you can go second PRB, this key here. Hit second first. And then it turns the decimal into a fraction, negative 3.5. So either put negative 3.5 or negative 3.5. I don't care. Okay, next problem. Negative 8x to the second power equals negative 64x. So there's two answers for the x variable because that x variable in the equation is to the second power. Now there's also this x here without a power, meaning it's to the first power. So those cannot be combined. You have to factor. But to factor, to set up the box and the wall and all that, you need a 0 on this side. And you don't have that, so you take the negative 64x to 0 with a plus 64x. Now, I got a plus 64x somewhere on this side, but not here, because that's x second. This is just x, so you put plus 64x in the hangout zone. So now you line up your equation with your own slots. You need a slot for x second, because we see that. You need a slot for x, because we have that. We do not make a slot for the constants because we don't have a constant, okay? So x second would be negative 8, and then x would be positive 64 because we're adding it. Now I make my wall, and I see the two terms, okay? Two terms is known as a binomial. So with binomials at this point, to factor them, factor means put it into an F1, F2. You make the GCF and then the parentheses. So, check the final term for a letter, and it's there. Check the first term for the negative, there's a negative there. And then put it in front of the slot. Now you got to fill that in by finding the GCF of the coefficients, 8 and 64. So 8, 64 is here too, so it'd be 8. So then I'm going up and dividing by whatever I put there, negative 8x, and that goes under both lines, whatever's in that parentheses. So that's going to be positive 1. Then I divide the x to the second by the x. That's how to do that, what I'm doing right here. You end up with an x alongside your 1. Then I take positive 64 divided by negative 8. Okay, I got negative 8, so I put minus 8. And then the x divided by the x, if there are no powers on either one, just cancel them right there. Okay, so we have negative 8x, and then we have 1x minus 8 equals 0. So f1, f2. So negative 8x could equal 0, or 1x minus 8 could equal 0. You just set each factor equal to 0. So you got times negative 8, so you divide by negative 8 here, and that would be 0. Over here you got times 1 minus 8, so you plus 8, 0 plus 8 is 8, then divide by 1 would still be 8. Okay, x would equal 8. 0 and 8 are the two possible answers. Okay, next problem. Negative 3x to the second power plus 12x equals 0. So there are two answers to this. Okay, we have an x to the second, and we have that x there without a power, meaning it is to the 1 power. But don't put 1 up there. You're going to end up confusing yourself. Okay. Okay, so you have to factor. So you're already set. The zero's there, so you don't need to move anything. Your slots are right here. Okay. You're ready for the GCF. Over there, wall on that side. You have the last term of the last of the two terms has a letter. The first term has the negative. Check the first term for a negative. If it is, you need to put a negative in your GCF slot. Then 3 and 12. So here's 3, here's 12, so it'd be in the 3 row. Okay, so negative 3x is my GCF, so I need to go up and divide these two by negative 3x. So that's 1. To divide x second by x, you put 2 x's, and you will still have an x alongside your 1. Positive 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4, so I put minus 4 because it was negative. Now, if neither one of these x's has a power, they cancel, and then we don't put any x alongside the 4. So you have negative 3x, and then 1x minus 4 equals 0. Okay, so negative 3x could equal 0, or 1x minus 4 could equal 0. So I divide by negative 3. 0 divided by negative 3 is 0. Times 1 minus 4. So you take out your minus 4 with a plus 4. So that's 4. You divide each side by 1, and that's 4 as well. So 0 and 4. Okay. 10x to the second power plus 15x equals 0. So again, I said x is to the second, so that's why there are two answers. Now you also have this x here. That's not to the second, it's to the first if there's no power. So these cannot be combined. You need to factor. So we're good. First you check for your 0. If it's there, you're set. You underline your terms. Okay, make that you're making the slots is what you're making. Okay, then you go right to your box. So you're looking at these two terms here. The two terms are the 10x to the second and the 15x. There is an x on the last term. There is not a negative in front. Now 10 and 15, you look in the 10 row. Nope. Here's 10 and 15 in the 5th row. So 5x is your GCF. So I go divide by 5x. 10 divided by 5 is 2. And then to divide your x's, you go xx. Then you cancel that common factor, but you still have an x left on top, so you put x alongside your 2. Then 15 divided by 5, it's a positive divided by a positive, so it's going to be a positive 3. Okay. And neither one of these x's have powers, so that allows me to just cross them out here and not put an x there. So you have 5x, then you have 2x plus 3. So F1, F2. So 5x could equal 0, or 2x plus 3 could equal 0. So you divide by 5. 0 divided by 5 is 0. Over here you got times 2 and plus 3, so you're going to minus your 3. 0 minus a number takes you to the negative of that number, and then you divide by 2. Okay, so I take negative 3 divided by 2. I got a decimal. You can put negative 1.5 as your answer, or you can go second PRB. That would be negative 1.5. I don't care if it's the decimal or the fraction. Just get one of them. Okay, next page. Negative 12x to the second power equals 20x. So you have two answers for x, okay, because of the x to the second. Now in that equation I also see x that's not to the second, it's to the first, so that's why you have to use your factoring properties. But you don't have the 0, so but you can't go making your box and making the wall. You can't do that till the 0's here. So you take out your positive, that's a positive 20x, you take it out by minusing 20x. Now remember, that had an x, so I need to minus 20x somewhere on the other side, but it can't go under the x to the second. An x to the second and an x cannot be combined, so you put minus 20x in the hangout zone. Now you line up your equals and you put 0. Now you make the slots yourself. So you have x to the second, that's there. And then x is there. There is no constant, okay? So you should not make a blank for your constants right there. So you got negative 12 and minus 20 means you put that in as negative, okay? Now you see the two terms you are trying to factor, these two. So now you make your GCF box. Okay, so does the last term, does the final term have a letter? Yes, it does, x. So you put x out in your GCF box. Does your first term have a negative? Yes, you put negative right in front, not against the x because you need a number there. To find the number, you find the GCF of your coefficients, 12 and 20. So 12, there's no 20 in the 12 row. There's a 12 again, 20 is not in that row. Here's 12, here's 20, it'd be 4. So negative 4x is my GCF. So negative 12 divided by negative 4 is positive 3. To divide x second by x, that means you leave an x alongside your 3. Then negative divided by negative is a positive, and 20 divided by 4 is 5, and then the x divided by x cancels. See, it cancels as you can see right there. So, you have negative 4x, and then you have 3x plus 5. And then F1, F2. So, negative 4x could equal 0, or 3x plus 5 could equal 0. So we have multiplication by negative 4, so we divide by negative 4, and that's 0. Okay. Okay, you got to take out your plus 5 by minus 5, and that's negative 5. Then you divide by 3. I'm going to divide negative 5 by 3. You can either write negative 1.6 repeating or go second PRB, and it'd be negative 1 2/3. 1 2/3. Either that or negative 1.6 repeating. 1 2/3. Sorry, I wrote that crappy. Okay, last problem. 18x to the second power equals 19x. So there are two answers. You have x second, and you've also got x to the first. So you have to factor. Before you factor, you have to see that you have a 0. You don't have it, so you need to get that equal to 0 by subtracting, since it's positive 9. Remember, that was 9. So I'm minusing 9x. So I have to minus 9x on the other side, but it can't go with the x to the second, so it goes in the hangout. Now you put the slots in. Okay, you have that one extra step. So you have x to the second, and you have x. You do not have the constant. Okay, see, we just have this and this. There's no constants. They're both multiplied. One's multiplied by x second, one's multiplied by x. So you have 18, and then you have the negative 9. Okay. Now you can make your wall, and you see the two terms you're trying to factor. So you make the two terms, you just make a GCF box. Check the final term for a letter. 0 is not the final term. That's why you make the wall. That's your final term. It's got the letter. Check the first term for a negative. It's not there. GCF of the coefficients, 18 and 9. So here's 9, here's 18. You look in the 9 first because it's the smaller. This would be 9x. Okay, so now you divide by 9x. 18 divided by 9 is 2. Then I divide the x second by the x. I end up with an x left over. Then I take the negative 9 divided by the positive 9. Negative 1. So I got a negative, so I write a minus. Then x divided by x without any powers. Those are just going to cancel. Okay, so we have 9x, and then we have 2x minus 1. F1, F2. So 9x could equal 0, or 2x minus 1 could equal 0. So you got times 9. So you divide by 9. 0 divided by anything is 0. Okay. And over here you got times 2 and minus 1. So you take out your minus 1 with a plus 1. 1. And then divide each side by 2. 1 divided by 2, you can write the decimal, or you can go second PRB, and it'll take it into a fraction, 1/2.